These machines behind me were built atop decades of program analysis science, engineered over 2 one-year stages of competition, and built by pioneers. Program analysis scientists, hackers, and engineers. So tonight, these machines will play capture the flag against each other. Tomorrow, we hope the lessons learned will change the field of computer security. Thank you.
There's an enormous amount of computational power ready to be unleashed here at CGC. Beneath the stage are huge amounts of electricity and water needed to power and cool the supercomputers on the stage. 300 kilowatts of power. That's enough to power 1.5 city blocks. 180 tons of water flow through these pipes at a rate of 200 gallons per minute to keep the computers on the racks liquid-cooled at all times. The entire stage is air-gapped to protect the data and the systems. The air gap also validates that there's no other outside influence and no human interaction. Everything that happens inside the air gap is autonomous. Data flows through the air gap through an air gap robot that literally reads Blu-rays of burn data from inside the game. The air gap robot physically moves the Blu-ray across and outside the air gap, then drops it into a reader that goes into our scorers and visualization. At the center back of the stage is a system of computers that's a digital referee. It issues the challenge sets, communicates to the bots, and handles the scoring and systems. The only humans in the game are inside the air gap. These are our human refs.
Ready?
Ready.
Game started at 0900 and 45 seconds Pacific.
Welcome everyone to the first ever fully automated cybersecurity automated competition. So what we'll see here today is much more than the world's first all-machine hacking tournament. The lessons learned could lead to a world where computer viruses, malware, and attacks are discovered in a matter of weeks, days, or even seconds.
Right now, all the teams are playing. They're all interacting with the system. All of them are finding vulnerabilities. They're all fixing them. Every single team is playing the game, and they're all advancing the state of the art.
This concept that we've been talking about with the POV, the bots have to actually generate the traffic that's necessary to exercise those bugs. So as they demonstrate those vulnerabilities, they'll be able to score points, and as long as their services are available, they'll be able to throw an attempt to prove a vulnerability. Each POV can be thrown up to 10 times per round. So for example, Rubius has thrown a successful POV versus one of the challenge sets called Thermal Controller. We see actually 2 binaries having data being ingested right now, where it's basically the same binary receiving one POV from one of the teams as well as from another. And in the overlap, we can basically see that the code flow diverges very late on about here. It's actually managed to execute and terminate correctly. This one is successful.
Okay, so maybe HJ knows more for us. HJ.
What strategy is this that you employed?
So all depending on the type of control that we have, we'll generate a variety of different potential POVs for them. And then each one we evaluate to see the quality of the POV. So all depending on what service the competitor has fielded at that point, we'll evaluate it to determine what's the best of the POVs candidates that we have selected that is appropriate for that particular service.
I just keep thinking, man, like our CRS does these awesome fast decisions, fast patches, fast exploitation, and as a human, there's no way I can keep up with that.
The address resolution service was basically the vulnerability that was modeled after the SQL Slammer like we were talking about. And we definitely saw some of the bots discover this vulnerability and actually begin trying to prove that vulnerability against other teams or other bots very, very early on. So this represents a true success to what we have going on here, because in that 5-minute window that Deb mentioned that she was hoping for, that actually managed to be proven and patched by several of the teams in the very next round. So that means that in a 5-minute window, a totally previously never seen before challenge binary was researched and evaluated and found vulnerable and patched by a completely autonomous system.
We wanted to, give them a chance to prove that the technology could do something, and they jumped right over that bar. It was awesome.
Xandra managed to discover and prove a vulnerability in one of the services that we call OpSim, but this is a unique situation, and it's something we were kind of hoping to see. They actually managed to discover an unintended vulnerability. So each of these services that's written, just like real-world software, it's impossible for us to have made absolutely certain that the one vulnerability that we intended is the only one that's present. So the interesting part here is that Xandra had discovered this new POV, exercised it against something that we hadn't actually even intended, and then Jima observed this occurring and successfully defended against it. So these are all results that we hadn't possibly had any ability to predict whatsoever.
Wow.
So Xandra POV succeeded against the reference binary, but not against GMA's patched binary.
So GMA was actually successfully able to patch a bug that we didn't even know existed in the software. But what kind of general purpose or even specific patches does GMA implement that could do this?
So that was probably one of our general purpose patches. We looked at areas of code where we know there are common vulnerabilities, and we just deliberately inserted, conservatively, the patches for those areas.
The mail sender was designed to be the hardest rematch challenge that we made. It was based on the original crackaddr vulnerability.
Our implementation of the mail server challenge basically wanted to strike a balance between the difficulty and the complexity of the original bug in SendMail and Halvar's example that was sort of a carved down subset of the problem. Either way, they are all sort of the classic state machine problems that are very, very difficult for program analysis. Those nearly infinite possibilities and that halting problem that we talked about before clearly come into play here. So Phish was the only team to actually successfully POV against our version of crackaddr. So this basically represents a leap forward in program analysis. For them to be capable of doing this means that we're one step closer to that thing that's basically been sort of the Everest of program analysis because of that state machine problem.
All right, so let's go to HJ down there with the teams.
Congratulations. What do you think about this?
It's pretty overwhelming.
Right.
Wow. I mean, all the talk about state machines and all the possibilities of state machines really reminds me of one of the papers that we published recently. We published the paper Driller, which is supposed to augment fuzzing with symbolic execution. And it's one of our really in-depth case studies talks about how exactly it traverses the state machines and is able to really explore deeply parts of the program that would normally be inaccessible to a more naive approach.
It was very rewarding to see that Phish actually created and threw a POV against this bug. That's huge.
Additionally, once they were POVing, it looks like Crispy deployed a patch, but it was a general purpose patch that did manage to mitigate the bug. So kudos to them for actually managing to patch it successfully without breaking it.
Towards the end of the game, it looks like most of the systems are getting overwhelmed with just the amount of data, and they're getting bogged down with how much is in there. And so they're unable to successfully prove the flaws that are out there.
Let's check back on, who was it? It was Galactica.
Galactica jumps out and actually throws a bunch of successful POVs, which we can see here because of these blue circles occurring inside of other teams' services. And so that's actually Galactica managing to successfully and then stealing back those colors and ending up being able to render it here. It's basically showing that the idea of this reasoning system is definitely working because you can't actually POV without at least some knowledge of the workings of that vulnerability. It's not like the general purpose patching techniques where there could be zero knowledge success, right? In a POV case, it definitely has to have understood the protocol. It definitely has to have decided what was necessary in order to exercise that vulnerability. So the thing that I'm really happy to see is that basically everyone has come to the table with something capable of that.
All right, so we have some scores coming up. Here we go.
So the overall listings we can see here, basically it seems like pretty much all the teams that are in the lead are managing to maintain their availability scores.
Okay, so we're going to go down to HJ. He has more information for us from the pit.
So you're currently in the lead with a 10,000 point lead. How are you feeling?
We're still excited to be in the lead. So DARPA released the submissions during the competition, and we have been looking at that. And unfortunately, it seemed that our system had a technical difficulty and stopped submitting patches.
Mayhem now has the second worst security in the game. This is the first time that's happened.
But they're also not submitting new POVs, so
right.
As challenge sets fall off, these scores should increase.
Their evaluation is also the second worst in the game.
So even though ForAllSecure is sort of dead in the water, just coasting, everyone else's motors are slowing down. And so they're gaining on them, but not fast enough to overtake them.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens.
Shellphish, who built the mechanical fish. TECHx, who built the bot Xandra. And now the winner of the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge, ForAllSecure and their bot Mayhem.